Welcome to The Work of Warriors, a podcast dedicated to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kim Ravage. This podcast is dedicated to the artists we've lost to mental health, addiction, and suicide, and to those who are still suffering in silence. Hello, this is Kim Ravage, your host. Today's episode is with the incredible Jon Bregel. He is a cinematographer and the founder of We Are Variable, a community of filmmakers dedicated to bringing wellness and growth into the industry. I could not have been more excited to meet with Jon. He has an amazing story and he's so fun to talk to, and he's just a really cool guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So enjoy. Jon Bregel, I'm so excited to have you here. I feel like you're my new friend. I just want to say, like, with the Work of Warriors being about bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry, I've learned over the years to really trust myself, trust my body, trust how things make me feel. And so as I stumbled upon you and your work with We Are Variable, and when I read a community of filmmakers dedicated to wellness and growth, I just felt hope. Like I just had this like wave of hope, because as surely you can relate as an entrepreneur, as somebody who is an advocate for wellness, it can feel lonely. Offline, you and I were just talking about the company of one, right? And I think that is just something that we don't often talk enough about. And I love the fact that you have a community that's dedicated to that. So I would just love to hear more about what you do. How did you get to the point where you wanted to create this community that's dedicated to wellness with filmmakers? How did you get there? Why is it important? And I would just love for our listeners to hear more.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me again, Kim. It's always good to have these types of conversations and just kind of get to the roots of all this stuff, because I find so much for me, it all starts for a personal reason, for personal reasons, and then it just expands from there, I suppose. But I mean, that's at least my story for sure. I had a production company in New York City, and it got pretty big pretty fast, and never really was educated on how to build a production company. Neither were my partners, and we hired on staff early on, and the overhead just got really high, and we were just kind of treading water for a long time. Every project that came across was uh, just a new lesson, like a big lesson in every project. And it was just all consuming. I'd invested my life savings in it. And it just went on and on and on. And I probably should have, well, I say should have, I wanted to leave like probably 3 to 4 years before I actually left. But the challenge was, at the time, I was so loyal to my friends as well that I worked with, and I think that's what really kept me there, was like our staff. And so I really learned through that experience how important it is for me to take care of myself. And I definitely was not doing that for that whole span of my life, the better part of my 20s. And it was actually when I'd taken a sabbatical. I bought a van and lived out of this van and took a sabbatical around the United States. And it occurred to me on that drive, just this idea of almost like an AA for filmmakers. I was like, I wish there was kind of a support group for filmmakers that could come together. We could talk about the struggles, the joys, help each other get through it. And all of that kind of stuff. And that was the initial kind of idea, which was, I want to say that was, maybe it was like 8 years ago or something. And that idea just kept popping up, once every few months, every 6 months, once a year, and just continually kept coming up. And then when I'd actually left my production company in New York City, I all of a sudden had all this free time for the first time ever. And I had been mentoring and helping out filmmakers over the years, just not very as consistently as I could now that I had free time. So when the free time opened up, I I had been doing some coaching work myself with a coach and learned a lot about coaching. And I was like, it's kind of like, huh, I wonder if I could apply this formula to filmmakers. And so that's what I did. I kind of developed it from just doing it to helping a few people out. And then I realized, like, oh, there's actually a big need for this. And then it turned into a business. And then the community ultimately, or initially, I should say, was a way to bring together all the filmmakers that I had coached, because I always was introducing them to one another. And because it's all the work I do is it's values based. So I get to really know people on that type of level. So there was really great connections that I was making. And I was like, okay, well, if I start a community through these like shared values, but it wasn't specific to wellness, like at that time when I was thinking about it initially, it was more just like connecting people that I felt had like kindred spirits. And then the wellness portion of it was kind of that developed from a series of conversations with my older business partner. We had reconnected and we had both gone through so much just depression and anxiety as a result of our 20s, and decided, okay, this is the angle, this is the direction to take. And my old business partner was really helpful in helping me get the wheels turning on the community element of it. And so that's kind of what it is. It's we just put it out there, wanted to see if anyone really resonated with it. We relaunched the production company as a wellness community. So I think because of the following that we had from the production company, there were some people that were interested initially, and then slowly uh, more folks have been joining, and it's been a good little ride so far. It's been a good time.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I mean, I feel like my brain is going off in all different directions, but I think the one biggest thing that you said was, I worked with people. It's a value based coaching. The community is values based. You're introducing people who share similar values. And I think that's really, I mean, I think it's important and I think it's powerful because so many people don't even know what that means. They don't even know
Mhm.
what that is. They have this amazing talent. They're, creative. They have a gift and somebody notices it and they bring it into the world, but they don't even know what their values are. They
Mhm.
don't know what their boundaries are.
Mhm.
And as most of us who, I think we share a very similar experience in different parts of the world, but this like, okay, my career is taking off. And then all of a sudden, like, why am I not happy?
Yeah.
And if you're not careful and you don't know your values and you don't know your boundaries, you will overextend yourself. You will cross boundaries. You will abandon yourself. You will do things you swore you never would do,
Mm.
And so I guess a question I have for you is how did this idea of values, like, did you learn that through coaching? Was that something you learned in the industry from a friend? How did that come about for you?
I think values coaching had a lot to do with that. There was a few different coaches that I had worked with. It was a career coach, a life coach, then there was an ADHD. I wouldn't say a coach, but that was the role that he kind of played for me. But values was always a part of that. But before values, before getting to values, it was boundaries and allowing myself to put things down and say, this is the time that I need for myself, or I can't make this call, or I can't do that. That's where I started to come in touch with myself again and my feelings. And ultimately, the values were, it was much more able or much more possible for me to kind of like understand this idea of values and the importance of values when I had some initial boundaries in place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they go hand in hand.
Hmm.
And I think one thing to note is the complexity of having values and boundaries in an industry that will likely not value them if you don't value for yourself, right? And I think that
Definitely.
needs to be talked about is nobody's going to fight harder for you than you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you have people promising you things and promising you money and, you know, luxury, if you will,
Hmm.
it's really easy to lose yourself. And so, that's one of my biggest passions is helping people establish their own personal values according to what matters to them and
Hmm.
not anybody else, and certainly not, people on the internet.
Right.
Um, but which is tricky. Um, but understanding what those boundaries are, who am I? Who do I want to be? What boundaries will I refuse to cross?
Yeah.
And knowing that ahead of time, like you said, I didn't know how to build this production company and it took off. And I
Hmm.
think that happens to a lot of creatives, a lot of brilliant people. Like I said, they have this gift and whoosh, it just takes off. That's why I think coaching is so important.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we're all inundated with lots of like self-care stuff and tips and tools, which are great. But what I find is those will only take you so far if you don't internally have that self acceptance, self respect, self love. And so when I hear somebody like you say, I had a career coach and a life coach and another coach, what happened? Like, where did you decide I'm worth this type of care? I'm worth this type of investment in myself?
Yeah, well, my old business partner had a lot to do with that. He was, and he is one of the most kind people, supportive people I've ever met in my life. And he's got an amazing heart, and he knew that I was struggling for a long time in the business, but we were both struggling. But it got to a point in the business for me where I had sent him an email at like midnight when I was in China on a shoot. And I told him, I was like, dude, I can't be in this company anymore. Like, this is just too much. It's just exhausting. I'm over it. Whatever. It's just kind of like a in the moment reactive thing. And I was desperate. And he emailed me back and he was like, look, dude, you either need to get a therapist or a coach, or I can't be your business partner anymore. And I was like, okay, I've never done either of those things before. This is new. And I was just in a state of desperation. I knew that I needed help. And so I didn't even have the energy to look for a coach myself or for a therapist or anything. So I was just like, do you know any coaches or therapists or whatever? And he just sent me a link to a life coach. And I was like, all right, well, then I'm just going to go to that one. And that's what I did. And in many ways, that gift that he gave me by suggesting that saved my life and opened me up to what I believe my heart was desiring for a long time, which was actually just love. Like it was love. It was a relationship. Uh, like I really was desiring love, not for myself, but also with another person, like an intimate relationship. And that first life coach helped me really identify what I understood at the time as my inner voice, what I understand now as God, but my inner voice, and you know, really understanding its needs. And at that time it was time for space to go on a sabbatical, to just have some time to myself. And through working more with that life coach, again recognizing like, oh, like this is what I really want, is like I want to get married one day. Like I want to do that. And so I'm completely forget what your initial question was, but
So
that
do
was
I,
my
but I don't care because I love your answer.
yeah. But no, coaching is amazing. Like I did that, and then I ultimately ended up leaving the production company a couple of years later because I was tuning so much into what I wanted that I ultimately realized like this company's too much. But also the other side of that story is that coincided with meeting my wife in China on a job. And when I met her, I was just like, I was already burned out from the company. And so when I met her, immediately I was like, okay, this is really special. I don't want to screw this up. That was my first instinct. And then when I came back to New York City 2 days later after meeting her, I walked into our new office, which was this huge space in Dumbo, like right on the water. And all this new furniture and artwork and stuff was being brought into the office. And I had this out of body experience where I was just in the doorway to the office and I was like, I got to get the heck out of here. And this was literally like weeks. We'd been renovating the office with contractors for like maybe a year or something. And I walk in and we made all these commitments to our directors and staff, and I walk in and I'm like, I can't be here anymore. And that next 2 weeks was like the hardest 2 weeks of my life. But I just took action on my feelings, even though there was no rationality to anything in the moment. But I was just like, you know what? Like, this is what I want. Like, I know that I want this thing, and I'm going to figure out how to make it right with my employees and with the staff. And fortunately, I did. And I'm on good terms with everybody, and that ended as well as it could have. But it was brutal. Those 2 weeks were absolutely brutal. And I was living in my van at the time in New York City. So it was like, I just remember being in that van, just like laying there for hours, just staring at the ceiling, like not taking any of the advice that the lawyer was giving me, because they were like just telling me all these things about the deal that I should be getting from the company and all this and that, and getting feedback from my dad and my mom and friends, and just ultimately knowing like I got to do what's best for me right now. It's time. And so I left, and then I spent some time in China, and then my wife ultimately ended up moving here a couple years later, and to Baltimore. So, and we're happily married. So I'm it's a happy story for sure.
My gosh, I love that so much. And I probably have like a million questions for you. But, I want to touch on the fact that you said what you've learned now is that inner voice, you attached it to desire, right? And
Hmm.
it's what you desired, but it's that internal voice of God, right?
Hmm.
And, people can call that and name it whatever they want. But I think that's so significant because when I imagine you, emailing your business partner at midnight in China, like, I think we've been taught and conditioned to believe that when those emotional disruptions happen, that there's something wrong with us, that,
Mm.
we're whatever. I didn't want to say the words, but it's bad, right? And
Hmm.
I see it as an invitation because
Mm.
had that never happened, you wouldn't have then been forced essentially to take those steps. And fortunately, you had a business partner who loved you enough to have his own boundary and
Yeah.
say, look, do something or I'm out. And that's a beautiful gift, right?
Yeah.
That feels so shocking to our system in the moment. But
Yeah.
he had a boundary, so he modeled that. And then you ended up with coaching and learning that disruption, that emotional dysregulation that you had at midnight that many of us experience. It's very human. But it caused you to take action and it caused you
Yeah.
to say, what do I really want? And
Yeah.
can we just talk for a second about how ironic it is that that is such a unique concept to actually pay attention to what you want. I think that's,
Yeah.
humanity in general. I think we all struggle with that. But then you're in an industry where there are so many outside voices who
Yeah.
are telling you what they want, who are
Hmm.
making money off your gifts, off your product, off your creativity. And it's so confusing because I'm sure you've experienced that fear of like, if I walk away, I'm going to be, canceled. I'm going to be done. I'll never work again. But then it's that, and do I abandon myself or
Yeah.
do I trust myself?
Yeah.
And what a beautiful story. I was like, are you going to write a book? I'm in the van looking at the ceiling, like, just a year's project. I kind of now I need to walk away. But that's how it happens. It's
Yeah.
so, I think, I'm stumbling over my words. I think it's more common than what we talk about.
Yeah.
It's these,
Yeah.
T in the road, the fork in the road kind of experiences where you have to make a choice. And I
Yeah.
always say, like, the world needs your gifts, but not at the cost of your soul.
Absolutely. And I'm just so grateful that I met my wife when I did in China at the time that I did. I mean, that to me is like God's work. I mean, that's how I understand it. I mean, that single-handedly to me saved my life and just opened up my entire world, and in ways that I could have never planned. And so forever grateful for the powers that be in that scenario for sure.
Yeah, it certainly feels divine. And, as an
Yeah.
outsider to the story, it's like, oh, that was absolutely orchestrated. That was all happening in perfect timing, right? That we all hear about, but it's hard to trust. But I do think it takes that intentional step of fighting for yourself and loving yourself and trusting yourself to be able to even notice,
Yeah.
right? And to realize, like, that's not a coincidence. This all happened for me, not to
Yeah.
me.
I'd also just seen and experienced single-handedly how hard it is to establish an intimate romantic relationship in this industry because of the reason you just mentioned, being like an artist and a creative, and people are always vying for your attention and pulling you in this way and that way, and how damaging and difficult that can be on a relationship and on the partner. And so when I met her and I left the company, I was like, well, now it's my time. Nobody's going to tell me what to do right now. And I need this time to learn about myself, learn about her, and establish a foundation for the relationship. So, like, all of this stuff was, I wasn't like aware of it in that moment that I stepped back into the office and had that like out of body experience. But I think it was just everything hitting me at one moment that was, if I stay in this company, there's no way that this relationship can work. And it was incredible how I can kind of unpack that out of body experience that I had now. But in the moment, it was so foreign and just, I couldn't even begin to describe what was happening in that moment. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so
Yeah.
how do you pour that into your community? What are the values for your community where you bring wellness and growth for a community of
Mhm.
filmmakers? Can you talk a little bit about what those values are?
Yeah, I mean, well, the number one value I would say is just wellness. I think is the thing that we all have in common. There are like sub values in the community as well, but honestly, it feels really, I feel really bad saying this as someone that's such an advocate for values, but I haven't even looked at them in like a year, because the wellness value in and of itself, it brings together such a group of kindred spirits. And I think I will probably redefine what the values are of the company other than wellness. But I know joy was one of the values as well. But again, I feel I probably should have had a better answer to this. But I just think everything's been feeling right and kind of growing organically through that value of wellness. And there's a lot to unpack within that one value. I mean, that could be spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, environmental. There's a lot of other aspects to that, but we mainly focus on the emotional, physical, spiritual, and emotional, physical, spiritual, and what's the other one? Dropping, having a brain fart, Kim.
You said spiritual, emotional, physical. I don't know. I could go on. Relational, mental.
Mental health. I always get mental health and emotional health kind of twisted together. And I'm also not like, this is the other thing about me, is I'm not like a mental health expert. Like, I didn't go to school for this stuff. And I've learned a bit through working with coaches and stuff and my own studies and everything. But I think my approach to wellness is very much more like intuitive. And I kind of ask people a lot of questions in the community about what they want to see, their thoughts and feelings, and kind of guide it that way. So at times it can feel like, I can feel like, oh, how am I qualified to be leading a community in wellness, when like I don't even know exactly how to define wellness depending on the day that you ask me, you know? But I don't know how much that matters. I think I just care so much about feeling the joy of filmmaking and loving it and loving yourself. And um I don't know, what does that look like? I don't know, but
Yeah, well, I'm going to let you off the hook for not having the clear answer because I think in that you actually gave a brilliant answer, which is when wellness is the main value,
mhm.
everything else has a much greater chance of working itself out.
Mhm.
over and over and over again. I think sometimes people think if I stop and I take care of myself, I'm going to lose time, I'm going to lose productivity. If we give our employees time off or, let them go, do something toward that, they're, we're going to lose them. Like, actually, no, things get better.
Mhm.
You are more creative, you're more of a team player, you're more productive, you deliver better product, you make more money. And
Mhm.
it's because I do think there is this universal value that we matter,
Mhm.
and that we matter before what we can make,
Yeah.
right? And when we are loving ourselves well and taking care of ourselves and honoring our wellness, we make, you and I both know Blaine Hogan, who's
Yeah.
another, filmmaker. He used to have a class called Make Better, and it's like, when you are better, not a
Yeah.
better person or a better filmmaker, but when you are well, you make better things and you
Yeah.
make the world better, because when you're well, guess what? Your wife benefits from that. Your family benefits from that. Your colleagues and your employees and even strangers at the grocery store, everybody wins
Yeah.
when we're taking care of ourselves. And so if wellness is the one value and that's really what you're focused on, I really do think it tends to make everything else work out better. And so I think that was actually a good answer.
Well, it's cool to hear you say that too, because now I'm thinking like, okay, maybe one value is the approach. Because with my coaching clients, initially I was helping them define 5 values, and then I heard this podcast with Brene Brown, who we've talked about, where she talks about the power of having 2 core values as your like primary drivers. So the practice I've been doing with coaching clients recently is I have them define their 5 values, and then I ask them if they think it's possible to condense them down into 2. And so maybe there is some thought in even one, I don't know, maybe one primary driver that's I just, yeah, the more values there are, it can just be easy to lose yourself in the kind of in the weeds and the details. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that. And I love Brene Brown. Um, and again, I think a lot of people don't even know what their values are. So even just initiating that conversation, just saying, what are your values? And here's what this means. It directs people back to themselves
Mhm.
for maybe the first time ever.
Mhm.
Right? Especially
Mhm.
if they've been creative or, chasing a dream for a long time, might be the first time they've ever even been asked. We're so used to putting out, right? To producing
Yeah.
things and to, for me as a caregiver, providing care, that it's nice when someone turns it back and says, what about you? What's
Mhm.
important to you? What do you value?
Mhm.
What does your best life look like? And I
Mhm.
think in this industry, it's even more important. The other thing, John, I wanted to touch on is you said, I'm not a mental health trained expert. And I appreciate you saying that. Um, but I also want to touch on the fact that we have been conditioned to believe, and I think we might have talked about this in one of our earlier calls, that there's those of us with mental health issues and those of us without,
Mhm.
right? And the truth of the matter is we all have mental health, just like
Mhm.
we all have physical health.
Mhm.
And I think, we focus far more on our physical health than our mental health. And I think if we do things that give us physical wellness, we're proactive.
Mhm.
We go to the doctor, we take supplements, we work out, we drink water, we do all these things. But and while those contribute certainly to mental wellness, we don't kind of look at it the same. We look at it as like, do I have a problem or do I not?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, we don't look at people with asthma like that, right? It's like, oh, you have physical health and you have asthma. Like, oh,
Right.
okay, well, you have anxiety. And all anxiety is a dysregulated nervous system,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
once you learn language and learn why, how you got there, and, what your personality is and how to regulate that, it's pretty treatable,
Yeah.
livable, curable.
Yeah.
It becomes non existent sometimes in the best case scenario. But I just don't think we have enough language, is what I'm trying to say. And so, I think it's beautiful when people who are not trained as mental health experts, who are doing that kind of work and helping other people find language, because it normalizes this idea of wellness as opposed to trying to avoid having an illness.
Mhm.
Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so important. I think we can change the narrative.
Yeah, and I think we can all help each other in so many ways. Like we don't have to be experts to ask one another, how are you doing? And to listen to someone's story. Like that's
Amen.
just very basic human behavior that I think we've lost because of, I mean, our industry doesn't help, but the times that we live in, obviously with phones and computers, it's the ability to just be present and hold space for people. I mean, that is healing, and to me, in a nutshell, is just being there to listen. And I don't know, that's the best form of therapy
Yeah, for
to
sure.
me.
It's connection, right?
Yeah,
It says, I
yeah.
see you. And I think that's a common shared human desire, is to be seen, to be able to show up as we are, right?
Hmm.
And just be seen and not have to shapeshift, not have to change, not have to put on the shiny face and not have to match our Instagram
Yeah.
reel, and just be like, this is really me. And I think it's a gift when we have those safe spaces to show up. And it seems to me that's what you're building in your filmmakers community. And I really appreciate that. One of the reasons I think wellness in the industry is so important is because there are so many unrealistic expectations,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I have a teenager. And so I'm watching, and with social media and everything, just watching this narrative and this fallacy that if you're famous and if you're successful, you'll be happy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have fallen for it. Most of my clients have fallen for it. And we end up in this state of underwhelm, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I got the award, I got the gig, I was on the stage, I did the thing, I got the job, but I'm the same person. I still feel the way I feel.
Hmm.
And so these empty promises, I think bringing wellness to the industry is so important. And having communities like yours is what it's going to take, because again, people don't have values. They don't know how to stand up and say no. They don't know how to
Hmm.
say, I'm not doing that. And they
Hmm.
don't know that
Hmm.
they even have a right to do that. And, we could get into whole legal stuff and whatnot, but I think the basic human wellness of having a foundation of knowing who I am and who I want to be and what my values are, where I'm willing to bend, what line I'm not willing to cross for anybody. Um, I just think it's powerful when we can give people that permission, and then also to check in on each other, like you said, to build a community that says, I care how you're doing, but before this deadline.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
that's so powerful. And
It's
there's so few
hard.
people doing it.
I think it's hard too. It's like a daily challenge to cultivate that type of awareness and behavior, just because of the pool of so many things. Like I can see why so many people aren't well. It's incredibly hard work, and I mean, I was also very privileged to have the time to step away from my work and do some really deep groundwork to know myself. And that's something I've been coming to awareness of recently, is just privilege. And not everybody has that luxury. I mean, therapy costs money, coaching costs money. These are all things that I could just pay for and do. And so I'm like in this space now of wellness and trying to be mindful of some of the things I say or the ways I act. And because yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing that I've had those experiences. I mean, there's other ways to heal, of course, like on your own, if you really into reading books, etc. But I do believe like having professional support is incredibly helpful. But again, not everybody can afford it. So
Sure. Yeah. Well, when you talk though, like I don't want to minimize the power that you have in creating the community that you have, because, for me a lot of times, especially when I work with like executives, but even entertainers and artists, it's like working with someone then knowing that I'm sending them back out into a battlefield. like
yeah.
like I have respect for, I understand the rest of the world doesn't work like this, but I really think if we can do this one person at a time, people like you building communities, like if, let's just say there was somebody within your community that was an employee of yours, I
Hmm.
don't know how that works in your structure, but like I would feel comfortable sending them back, right? Like,
Hmm.
okay, you have a superior, you have a support system, you have, a creator, a cinematographer, a director who values you. And let me tell you, that's
Mm,
a game changer because so
mm,
often it's like helping people find themselves in an industry, in a situation, in a corporation where I might be the only one who cares about their wellness at that point, right?
yep,
And
yep.
so it is tricky. And so again, I just really am so inspired by the fact that you're building a community and it's just much needed and it's
Thank you.
valuable and it matters and it makes a difference. I say if we can bring mental wellness to the industry, we can bring mental wellness to the world.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. I think I'd have to agree.
Yeah. So can I ask, like, what are two or three things that you do on a regular basis that helps you keep your mental wellness in a good state?
Yeah. So every morning and every evening, I've been doing the same routine now for about, I don't know, 5 years or so, but I consider this my life bumpers. That's how I've defined it for myself. And so I start with meditation in the mornings. I'll do anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes of meditation. And then I journal, and my journaling is a mixture of like prayer and writing, and I'm always writing to God. That's just how my journal prompts are, and it always starts with gratitude. And gratitude has been something that has I've been feeling the fruits of, actually, within the last like 4 months. It's I've been practicing it for like 5 years in journals, but for the longest time, I'm like, is this actually doing anything? Like, I don't really know. Like, I know it feels good sometimes, so I just kind of kept doing it. But recently that's been paying off in really big ways, the gratitude journaling. And then after that, I recently just started, actually within the last few months, a journaling prompt in the mornings where I write one thing that I can do in the day that will make me feel healthy, one thing that will make me feel connected, and one thing that'll make me feel purposeful. And that's been a really I could go on and on about that because that's been really cool.
I love
uh,
that.
So there's the morning routine, the evening routine. I've also been going to the gym for I don't know how many years now. It's a very light workout. I mean, I'm in and out within an hour, and I don't barely even break a sweat. And that's something I like to do before 9 a.m. And I don't check my phone. I sleep with my phone off too, so like I don't check my phone until I'm done. Usually 3 hours in the morning of whatever I'm doing. That's another thing that's been helpful. And then I'm also a Christian, so I go to church on Sundays. I take off Sundays. I take off most of Saturdays, and I take off Thursdays. So I'm like very much about. Of course, when I have shoots, everything changes. but but as far as the routine, the things that are always in place are the routines. Like those things very rarely get
Yeah.
bumped. But and
Yeah.
there's
I'm
all
glad
sorts
you
of little
clarified
things.
that because I think somebody listening might be like, well, how is he doing this?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Good
But
clarification.
but no, I do like these are all things that are like um what's it called? That have been like battle tested over the last like 5 years,
Yeah.
that I could realize that I can afford to do them, and it's important, so I just do it. So
And do you try to maintain some of those? Like if you're on a shoot, right, and it's hair on fire for weeks or months, like do you try to incorporate as many of those still as you can? Knowing, I don't know how you feel, but sometimes I'm like, it doesn't have to be perfect.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like I keep a list. I call it the damn thing. And it's
yeah,
just like, just do the damn thing, like your life bumpers, right? Like I feel my
yeah,
best when I do these things, whether I like it or not.
yeah,
And I don't always hit them. I rarely hit all of them every day, but
yeah,
it's that focus because it's like, you matter, right? And looking in the mirror, like, you matter.
yeah,
And it's like, the more I hit, the better day I have. And
yeah.
there was a time in my life, where that would have felt like, I don't have time for that. That's a
Mhm.
burden. It's too cumbersome. It takes too long. I got to get to work. But that was a whole nother, you know, episode of not understand, a whole nother, not episode, but like life season of not really being self-attuned, right? Just
Right.
thinking that what many of us wrestle with, right? My worth comes from my work.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely was a time where I would not, if I was on shoots, I would not prioritize the routines as much. And, I would go out and stay out late for dinner and all that stuff. But more within the last couple of years, I've actually realized that the more stressed out I am and the more stuff I have to do, the more I actually need to emphasize those routines. So it seems, and it's been a hard boundary to put up,
Mhm.
especially when, you've done a long day and everybody wants to go out for drinks and dinner and you're just like, oh no, I'm just going to go back to my hotel room. But like, I've actually learned that respect me more because of that. And at first I was really scared about it, but at this point I'm like, I can't be in this industry if I'm not taking care of I just can't. And
Amen.
so there's things that
Shout
I
that
have
from
to
the
do.
mountaintops.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's just true for me. Like I can't shoot. I can't. This industry's so hard. Like, and all the responsibility that we have on ourselves, on our scouts to make sure everything's right, and then on the shoot days,
yeah,
it's such a burden. And I need every ounce of my mind and my spirit to be there in those moments. Because if you mess up and like if you don't come in prepared and if you're not having a good day, like safety, money, all these things are real consequences.
yeah,
And I also just know, like, having had a production company myself for 8 years, it's so expensive production. The cost is so expensive, and every
yeah,
little mistake or if you're lacking clarity, you're going to not be making the best decisions you can, and everything really matters. So I really respect the process of film production, and I think it demands our best selves. And that's just how I think. That's how I feel about it.
yeah.
So
Well, and I just hope that we can help more people feel that way about it.
it's easy to be like very passive about it, and just think like, oh, this is just a Cheerios commercial. It doesn't matter, think you're always better than everything you're working on. But I experienced that way of thinking for a big part of my life, and it didn't end well for me.
Yeah,
So I think there's a much better mindset of gratitude to bring towards whatever. And we're getting paid a ridiculous amount of money to do this job. And it's like, good Lord. I mean, so that's the gratitude that I've been tapping into now that I'm working a lot more in film this year, is just like not trying to be who I used to be as far as like thinking I'm always better than every job that I'm on.
yeah, yeah. And, I believe that the people who are the most unaware, the people who lack self awareness are the ones who cause the most harm.
Mm.
And, to the contrary, people who are self aware, doing their inner work, focusing on themselves, it's not selfish. It actually makes it better for the rest of us because,
Mm-hmm.
people who are self aware, they care about other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're an example of that. And they just help the rest of us do better and take care of ourselves, even when we don't understand. And it might be 5 years later, somebody's like, I didn't know what that guy was doing, but now I get it. Well, you might just be planting seeds for some, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
Yeah. But I think that the universal message that you and I are talking about is the mental and physical wellness is so incredibly important in order to be truly successful in this industry. I don't even like the word entertainment industry anymore. I'm just like, can we just call it the
Mm.
creative industry?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about entertainment. I feel like, I don't know, it doesn't match what's really happening. Um, it's so powerful and it's so spiritual and it's so personal.
Hmm.
It's not just entertainment, right? But
Yeah.
I just think it's important, like you said, to make it in this industry and to really appreciate the success that you do have. You
Yeah.
need to be well. Otherwise, you do keep moving that goalpost. You do lose your gratitude. You do start to get a little too big for your britches. You think you're better than the job you're on. Um, and I so get it. And I think when you practice that self care and that wellness, you can actually enjoy those checks when they come in. You can enjoy the
Yeah.
collaboration, the coffee around the
Yeah.
table, and be like, we did this. It's
Yeah.
just a better experience for everybody.
It just makes it fun and enjoyable to show up on whatever the shoot is for whatever brand or whatever, and just enjoy it and play and not be so tied to that project or that product. It's like a fun collaboration. Sure, there's challenges with like agency and client, that but it's not that that's not fun, it's just that's the reality. Like that's the
Sure.
business we're in.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, like, starting out in the business, it's everything is just so personal, and it's hard to get that perspective. So again, like, grateful for the humiliation that I experienced from my depression.
Yeah.
Just kind of seeing things a bit more clearly now, I think, which is good.
Yeah. Well, if anyone were listening and they were feeling like they're struggling to even think that they're worth this kind of level of self-care, or they don't know where to start, or they think, I don't have time for that, like what would be one small tangible thing that you would tell somebody, like, just start here? Like for me, I always say, like, just start by hydrating. Let's just start there. Just
Yeah.
imagine your body being hydrated. And it can be so small. I think we think it has to be this big, grandiose thing. Like, what would be one small thing you would offer?
Man, I know how hard it can be when you're in the grips of anxiety and depression to do anything. Even take one breath, like one conscious breath can be too much. But I think that probably is where I would suggest starting, because you can do it right in the moment where you are. You don't have to go anywhere. And just taking a really deep breath of gratitude, if you're able to muster that, which probably not when you're in the throes of depression, but just a really deep breath. And that would be my suggestion. There's a lot of other things that are a bit bigger than that, like walking around the block or things of that nature. But I found through breathing myself, getting in tune with my breath, like that has been such a pathway to so many incredible things that, but that's a great question. I haven't really thought of that specifically before.
Yeah. And when you say
Yeah.
breath, what the visual that comes to mind for me is like putting your hands on your chest and closing your eyes and just breathing and just saying, I matter.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will bring you to your knees because you
Hmm.
don't feel like it when you're depressed and anxious. And so sometimes we do have to go through the motions first and let
Yeah,
the feelings catch up. Yeah.
definitely.
I think
It
that's a
is an
great.
Yeah. It's a cool feeling. It's definitely a cool feeling to be like, whoa, like I'm alive and I'm breathing, and like life may be flashing by at a million miles an hour, but like this is where I am, and it all kind of starts right here. That can be a really, um I don't know what the right word is, but just
It's
a
the work of a
wonderful feeling.
warrior.
Yes. There you go. That's it.
It is. That's the life is flashing by, and I can just start right here with me like that. That is the work of a warrior. We've been taught that a warrior has to sacrifice themselves to take care of everybody else, and we do. And I think as highly driven people, creatives, entrepreneurs, etc., that is so dangerous, right?
Mm.
Because as you know, you sacrifice your money, you sacrifice your relationships, your family, your time, your everything, your wellness, your mental health. But when so for the point of the work of warriors for me is a warrior is actually somebody who takes care of themselves first so
Mhm.
that they can help take care of the rest of us. And then if we're all doing that, we just take better care of each other. And
Yeah.
again, everybody wins.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
John, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be doing this work with you and to collaborate, and that, to know that we share values, and I just really appreciate and am inspired by the work that you're doing. So thank you. And thank you for being part of the Work of Warriors.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. This is great.